We can't talk about last things without talking about millennialism and some of the competing theological ideas out there about the last times. This begins on page 1149. In Christian eschatology, the term millennium refers to the 1,000 years of Revelation 20. Revelation 20 and 21 portray the entire New Testament era and its consummation with the coming of a new heaven and a new earth. Okay? So that's where the term actually comes from. It comes from Scripture, and it describes the entire New Testament era, right? And then its final consummation. So we are literally, from the proper understanding, biblical understanding, in the last times. We've been in the last times since Christ's resurrection and ascension. So the church is carrying forth the gospel until that last day. However, and they bring this up on page 1149 and 1150, the term millennialism has come through the years to refer not only to various views about this period, but also to different views about the timing and then even the nature of the return of Christ. So they talk about four different ones. We're just going to take them in order that the book presents them. And the first one is historic premillennialism. This is sometimes referred to as chiliasm. So this holds that Christ will return to establish a 1,000-year kingdom on earth, right? So the 1,000 years in Revelation 20 does not refer to the entire New Testament era, but to an actual 1,000-year kingdom here on earth. And here's what they hold, historic premillennialists. Christians who have died will be raised. Christians who are still alive will be transformed, and they will reign with Christ during this 1,000 years. This view is called historic because many of the first Christians held such a view, and it is called premillennialism sometimes because it holds that Christ will return before the millennium, right? So it's not like 1,000 years and then Christ comes. No, he comes before, people are raised, 1,000-year reign, which helps you understand postmillennialism. So postmillennialism holds that Christ will return after the 1,000 years, okay? So unlike the historic premillennialists, postmillennialists do not believe that the millennium of Revelation 20 should be taken literally, okay? They do, however, regard the millennium as a recognizable and hoped for golden age in which there will be peace, order, and prosperity, and where the gospel of Jesus Christ is widely believed and where the Christian influence is pervasive. So they see Jesus coming at the end. They don't think the 1,000 years is 1,000 years. However, they are looking to this kind of golden age when everyone's going to believe, kind of like the historical premillennialists, except they believe Jesus comes and then you have the golden age. They think there's going to be this golden age. The postmillennials think there's going to be this golden age and then Jesus comes at the end. That brings us to the amillennials. Amillennials also hold that Christ will return after the millennium. For this reason, the author points out, it might be named misleadingly as realized millennialism, okay? Those who hold this position are identical to post-millennialists, okay? In fact, millennialism is sometimes called post-millennialism. However, the amillennials differ from the post-millennials because amillennials don't expect a golden age to precede and signal the return of Christ. Amillennialists regard the entire New Testament age extending from Christ's first coming until his second coming as the millennial. Okay? Dispensational premillennialism. Now, this is the one that causes the most problems by my estimation. Because as the book points out, we're dealing here with an entire different theology, okay? So they hold, dispensationalists, that the New Testament promises concerning Israel, or excuse me, the Old Testament promises concerning Israel apply only to Israel. Okay, so their theological system understands that God has dealt with human creatures in different ways during different periods of human histories. There's these epochs or these dispensations, right? So these different ways are called dispensations, and the most common number that the dispensationalists use is that there's 7 dispensations, right? And there's 2 presuppositions. They point this out on 1150. One is a distinction between Israel and the church. They see those as absolutely separate. And number 2, a principle of literal interpretation in the Bible. Okay? So, in this understanding, the church is not understood as foreseen by the Old Testament. And the New Testament church, this age that we're in now, is like a parentheses. You know how parentheses on either side? And God's plan for Israel. But they hold that the time is coming when the parenthesis will end, and then it will go back to the plan for Israel. That plan will resume. Okay? Now, dispensationalists, dispensational premillennialism causes all kinds of challenges. In America, it's very popular. It's been popularized by a series of books and then movies called Left Behind series. And then there was a book prior to that called The Late Great Planet Earth. And so this has taken deep root. And essentially it turns this whole talk about Christ coming into law, right? And essentially you could summarize the dispensational premillennialists as Christ is coming, so you better watch out, right? Whereas Scripture presents, as we noted in the law and gospel understanding of the second coming of Christ, Christ's return for those who are baptized, right? Those who God has called through his word and sacraments, is a time of joy. So they put a lot of stock in being able to kind of read the signs of when it is coming. So you have to deal with all 4 of those. I'm going to claim that the most prominent form of millennialism is the dispensational premillennialists.